Imagine you're like trying to pick a restaurant for dinner,
Right.
And you pull up an app to check the reviews.
Right, just scrolling through Yelp or whatever.
Exactly. And usually you expect to see a certain kind of statistical distribution, like a bell curve, essentially.
Yeah, that makes sense.
You know, you have a handful of people claiming it's the greatest meal of their entire lives.
Right, the 5-star fanatics.
Yeah. And then you have this massive bulge in the middle of folks saying, you know, the food was fine, but the service was a bit slow.
The 3-star crowd.
Exactly. And then you have that trailing edge of 1-star reviews from people who are just like angry they couldn't get a table near the window.
Oh, there's always one.
Right. Even the absolute worst restaurants in your city, the ones with genuine health code violations, they usually have some contrarian reviewer who found a redeeming quality.
Like they'll say, the lighting was okay, or the napkins were folded nicely.
Exactly. Human beings are incredibly diverse in their tastes, which makes it practically impossible to achieve a true, unified consensus of absolute failure.
It's a statistical anomaly across any medium,
Right.
really, but especially in the highly subjective world of film criticism.
Oh, for sure.
I mean, even movies widely considered to be historic cinematic disasters usually manage to scrape together like a 10 or 15% approval rating.
Because someone out there finds it funny, right?
Exactly. There is almost always a critic who appreciates the camp value, or who thought, you know, the costume design was ambitious, or who simply enjoyed the sheer audacity of a bad script.
Right.
Getting a large group of professional critics to universally agree that a piece of art has 0 redeeming qualities is, well, it's like trying to herd cats into a perfect circle.
But then you look at the 2018 mob biopic Gotti,
Oh, boy.
starring John Travolta,
Yeah.
and suddenly that bell curve we just talked about doesn't just flatten out, it drops completely off a cliff into an abyss.
A total freefall.
We are looking at a genuine cinematic rarity today for this deep dive.
Right.
A mathematically perfect 0% critic score on Rotten Tomatoes.
0%. It's almost hard to do that on purpose.
Not a single positive review out of dozens and dozens of published critiques from major outlets. It is the critical flatline.
But, you know, the 0% score is just the headline. It's ultimately just the smoke.
Right.
The fire underneath that score is what makes this specific movie such a fascinating subject for us. Because that perfect 0 doesn't even begin to tell the full, bizarre story of why this film is considered a colossal, multi-layered disaster.
It really doesn't.
I mean, this isn't just a movie with a bad script or some questionable lighting choices.
Yeah.
The failure of Gotti is systemic.
And that is exactly our mission for today's deep dive. We are taking a massive stack of sources to try and figure this out.
We really dug deep for this one.
We have scathing forensic reviews from tech and culture sites like Mashable and CNET.
Yeah, those were brutal.
We have incredibly detailed hour-long video essays from YouTube critics like Ralph the Movie Maker and Mr. Skip.
Those guys broke it down scene by scene. It's incredible.
And we have the labyrinthine Wikipedia production histories. Plus, we even have deep dive business breakdowns of tech startups.
Which sounds weird for a movie review, but it's so relevant.
It really is.
Yeah.
So we are going to sift through all of this material to understand, for you, the listener, exactly why this movie is universally regarded as a masterclass in how not to make a film. In short, we're finding out why Gotti sucks.
We should probably preview the journey ahead for you, because it goes far, far beyond the boundaries of a standard movie review.
Oh, absolutely.
We're going to explore a decade of what the film industry calls development hell.
A decade.
Yeah. And we will look at the psychological and narrative dangers of allowing the subjects of a biopic to essentially rewrite their own history.
That part is wild.
And perhaps most surprisingly, we are going to untangle a wild corporate conspiracy.
Wait for it.
It involves fake online review campaigns, bot farms, and a doomed movie theater's subscription app that tried to play the role of a Hollywood studio in a desperate bid to save its plummeting stock price.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because before we can even begin to analyze the absolute mess that ended up projected onto theater screens, we have to look at the structural mess behind the scenes.
Right.
Looking at the timeline provided in our sources, it becomes incredibly clear that this project was fundamentally compromised from its very inception.
So from day one.
We have to start in the boardroom before we can judge the cutting room.
So the origins of this disaster go all the way back to the year 2010.
8 years before it came out.
Exactly. An independent production company called Fiore Films held a press conference to announce they had secured the exclusive life rights from John Gotti Jr. to produce a feature film about his father's life and their family dynamic.
Okay.
And at this early stage, the film had a slightly different, much more dramatic working title. It was called Gotti, In the Shadow of My Father.
Which, as a title, sounds like it's aiming for prestige, right?
It really does.
It sounds like a sweeping, serious, generational drama. It promises a thematic exploration of legacy, the weight of a criminal empire on the next generation, that whole father-son dynamic.
Yeah, it has gravitas.
It sounds like something that would attract serious, heavyweight Hollywood talent.
And initially, it actually did attract that exact caliber of talent. Barry Levinson, an Academy Award-winning director with a phenomenal track record for complex character studies, was attached very early on to direct.
Barry Levinson, that's huge!
But he didn't stay.
Right.
Then the project moved to Nick Cassavetes, a director known for visceral, emotional dramas.
Sure.
He also departed.
Of course.
Then it was handed to Joe Johnston. He is known for massive, technically complex blockbusters like Captain America, The First Avenger.
That is a wild pivot from Barry Levinson, by the way.
Totally different style. And he eventually left as well.
Wow.
This revolving door of highly credentialed directors over a span of several years is the textbook definition of a project languishing in development hell.
What does that usually mean behind the scenes?
It usually indicates that the script is fundamentally flawed, or the funding is highly volatile, or the creative direction mandated by the producers is just impossible to execute.
Right, like nobody can agree on what movie they're making.
Exactly. Eventually, after years of this musical chairs routine, the director's chair landed with Kevin Connolly.
I remember reading that name in the production history and having to do a double take.
Oh, I know.
Kevin Connolly. As in, the actor best known for playing the character E, the manager, on the HBO comedy series Entourage.
The very same.
Wow.
Now, to be fair to Connolly, he had directed a couple of small independent films prior to this, titles like Gardener of Eden and Dear Eleanor.
Okay, so he wasn't fresh off the street.
Right, he wasn't entirely without experience behind a camera. But there is a monumental difference between directing a low-budget, contained indie drama and tackling a sprawling, decade-spanning mafia epic.
Oh, absolutely.
A movie like this requires massive, period-accurate set pieces, complex crowd control, and the management of a massive ensemble cast. It is a huge leap in scale and logistical complexity.
A completely different beast.
But the chaos wasn't limited to the director's chair. The casting process was equally, if not more, turbulent and disjointed.
The casting history reads like a fever dream of early 2010s Hollywood.
It really does.
At various points during those years of development hell, the producers proudly announced that Al Pacino, Lindsay Lohan, and Ben Foster were all firmly attached to star in various key roles.
None of them ended up in the final film.
Not a single one. But the situation involving Joe Pesci is the one that truly highlights how mismanaged and erratic the production was.
The Pesci incident is incredibly revealing.
Yeah, break that down for us.
So, early in the development cycle, Joe Pesci was officially cast to play Angelo Ruggiero. He was a physically imposing key associate of John Gotti's.
Right, a heavy hitter.
And Pesci is a highly dedicated actor, particularly in the mob genre. He took the physical preparation for the role very seriously.
He always does.
The sources detailed that he actually went out and purposefully gained 30 pounds specifically to accurately portray the heavy-set, intimidating physical presence of Ruggiero.
He altered his own body chemistry and health for the job.
Yes.
That is an enormous commitment of time, energy, and physical well-being.
And after he put in that physical work and altered his appearance, the producers allegedly turned around, informed him his salary was being significantly reduced, and completely recast him in a different, lesser role.
Are you kidding me?
No. They wanted him to play the Lucci's crime family underboss Anthony Casso instead.
Wow.
Understandably furious at the bait and switch, after he had already done the physical preparation for a specific character, Pesci filed a $3 million lawsuit against Fiore Films.
Good for him.
The lawsuit was eventually settled at a court, but you have to look at what that signifies.
Right.
It sets a tone of a production that is making promises it cannot keep,
Yeah.
shifting resources randomly, and treating established veteran actors poorly.
It is the hallmark of a production that is completely out of control.
Absolutely.
And the ultimate undeniable symptom of that total loss of control is found right in the film's opening credits.
Oh, this part is staggering.
By the time this movie actually hit the screen in 2018, it had an absolutely astounding 44 credited producers.
44.
Just wrap your head around the number for a second. 44.
It is a staggering figure. And to understand why the YouTube critics and industry analysts focus so heavily on that number, we have to explain the actual mechanics of film financing and what a producer title actually signifies.
Right, because most people just see the name scroll by.
Exactly. In a healthy, well-functioning film production, a producer is a stabilizing force. You usually have a lead creative producer who works closely with the director to protect a singular creative vision.
Like the captain of the ship.
Right, and a line producer who handles the day-to-day logistics, the budget, and the schedule.
The nuts and bolts.
When you see 44 names attached as producers, executive producers, or co-producers, it signifies the total collapse of that singular vision.
It's the ultimate red flag. But how does a movie even physically acquire 44 producers? They can't all be on set making decisions.
No, they aren't. What happens in independent film financing, especially on a project that has languished in development hell for 8 years, is that the production constantly runs out of money.
Oh, okay.
To keep the lights on, literally to pay for the next week of shooting, the original backers have to go out and find piecemeal funding.
So they're just scrounging for cash.
Exactly. They approach wealthy individuals, equity firms, or smaller production companies and essentially say, if you give us $100,000 to finish shooting this scene, we will put your name on the poster as an executive producer.
So they are selling vanity credits for cash infusions.
Precisely.
So you have dozens of people who bought their way into the project, and because they put money in, they suddenly feel entitled to give script notes or dictate creative choices.
Exactly. It's a nightmare for the director.
It reminds me of being assigned a group project in high school. But instead of 4 kids trying to figure out a presentation, you have 44 different people all aggressively trying to hold the steering wheel of a moving car at the exact same time.
That's a great way to put it.
If 44 people are yanking the wheel in different directions, you are guaranteed to drive the car straight into a ditch.
That analogy hits the nail on the head. When a movie lacks a guiding, authoritative author behind the scenes, when the boardroom is a chaotic scramble for cash and influence, that chaos inevitably bleeds directly onto the screen.
It has to.
It doesn't just affect the mood on set. It physically manifests in the very narrative structure and editing of the final product.
Which brings us perfectly from the chaos of the boardroom right into the disaster of the cutting room.
Yes, the edit.
Because the structural choices made in Gotti actively seem designed to alienate you as a viewer. It's not just a bad story. It's a story told in the most fragmented, confusing, and user-hostile way imaginable.
Let's break down the basic narrative architecture of the film.
Right.
Most successful biopics, and particularly those in the organized crime genre, rely on a relatively traditional linear 3-act structure.
Sure.
The audience needs to see the humble beginnings, or the early rise, the intoxicating peak of their power and wealth, and finally, the inevitable crushing fall from grace.
Like Scarface or something.
Exactly. Chronological storytelling is utilized because it allows the audience to clearly understand cause and effect. It allows the viewer to track the character's psychological development.
Right.
Gotti, however, completely discards this proven framework.
Completely throws it out the window.
Instead, it utilizes a bewildering, frantic, nonlinear timeline that jumps across decades without warning.
And bewildering might actually be an understatement.
Oh, definitely.
The YouTube critic Ralph the Movie Maker did a phenomenal second-by-second breakdown of this in his video essay, and it is staggering to hear the math.
What were the numbers on that?
Within the first 14 minutes of the film, the narrative jumps between 8 completely different time periods.
8 time periods in 14 minutes.
And the most frustrating part is, they aren't always explicitly specified for the viewer.
The editing is borderline incomprehensible.
It really is.
As the sources point out, the film opens in the year 1973 with an assassination in a bar.
Okay, starting with action.
Then, suddenly, and without a clear thematic transition, it jumps forward to an unspecified future date where an elderly John Gotti is dying in a federal prison medical ward.
A huge flash forward.
Then, almost immediately, it cuts to a completely different federal prison from decades earlier.
Wait, what?
Yeah. Then it jumps to a moment just after his release from that second prison. Then it flashes back to a third prison setting in 1975, and so on.
My head is spinning just listening to that.
It subjects the viewer to severe narrative whiplash before they've even settled into their seats.
I want to push back on this structural critique for a second, though, or at least play devil's advocate.
Okay, go for it.
Is a nonlinear timeline inherently a bad choice? Because if you look at a director like Quentin Tarantino, he uses nonlinear storytelling all the time.
That's true.
Pulp Fiction jumps back and forth constantly. Christopher Nolan uses it to great effect in Memento or Oppenheimer.
Masterpieces.
Right. So why does it work for them but fail so spectacularly here? Why would a director choose to chop up a naturally compelling, built-in rise and fall story into a jigsaw puzzle that feels like it's missing half its pieces?
It's a great question. The distinction lies in the underlying purpose of the nonlinear structure.
Okay.
When a master filmmaker uses a fragmented timeline, it is designed to build suspense around a specific impending event, or to highlight brilliant thematic parallels across a character's life.
Give me an example.
Think of The Godfather Part 2. It masterfully crosscuts between young Vito Corleone's steady rise in the early 1900s and his son Michael's moral and spiritual descent in the 1950s.
Right. The juxtaposition serves a deep thematic purpose.
Exactly. In Gotti, the time jumps serve absolutely no thematic purpose. It feels less like an artistic choice and more like a crutch.
A crutch? How so?
It feels as though the filmmakers simply couldn't figure out how to organically write connective tissue between the different decades of Gotti's life. So they just abruptly spliced the scenes together.
Wow.
It is a massive failure because it completely robs the audience of any narrative momentum.
It totally kills the emotional buildup. In a traditional mob movie like Goodfellas, you need that chronological pacing to show the intoxicating allure of the criminal lifestyle early on.
You have to see the appeal.
Exactly. You see Henry Hill as a wide-eyed kid parking Cadillacs, flush with cash, making the audience understand why someone would choose this life.
Right.
That early seduction makes the agonizing paranoia and the devastating fall later in the movie feel earned. You feel the crushing weight of time and consequence.
And by jumping randomly from 1973 to his deathbed and back again, Gotti destroys any sense of consequence or progression.
You don't get to feel his power steadily grow, and you don't feel the weight of his downfall.
It plays out like a series of disconnected random vignettes rather than a cohesive life story.
Yeah, that's exactly what the YouTube critics were saying.
And to make matters worse, because the editing is so chaotic, the filmmakers had to rely on incredibly lazy exposition to keep the audience informed.
Oh, the voiceovers.
Yes. Instead of establishing characters organically through dialogue, action, and setting, the movie relies heavily on quick, on-screen text, like chyrons detailing names and dates.
And John Travolta providing constant, heavy-handed voiceover to literally just explain to the audience what is happening in the plot.
It violates the most sacred rule of cinema: show, don't tell.
And it gets even lazier than just using voiceover.
How so?
They actually rely on archival television news footage to cover massive, deeply emotional plot points instead of actually filming scenes about them.
That is baffling.
The sources highlight a particularly egregious example of this. In real life, Gotti's 12-year-old son, Frank, was tragically struck and killed in a traffic accident by a neighbor named John Favara.
An incredibly tragic event.
Extremely. A few months later, Favara mysteriously disappeared, and it is widely understood he was murdered by the mob in retaliation.
Right.
That is a massive, character-defining sequence of events. It involves profound grief, rage, and a corrupted decision to seek ultimate revenge.
That should be the emotional core of the movie.
You would think so. But instead of a dramatic scene showing Gotti wrestling with this or ordering the hit, the movie simply cuts to an archival news report announcing that the neighbor has gone missing.
It is an incredible misstep in visual storytelling.
Just skipped right over it.
As one critic aptly pointed out, watching Gotti feels less like engaging with a dramatic emotional film and more like having someone hastily read a Wikipedia page aloud to you while you sit in a dark room.
That is painfully accurate.
The reliance on archival footage for key emotional beats means the audience never gets to see the characters react to the most important moments of their own lives.
Which is the whole point of acting.
Exactly. And furthermore, the structural chaos introduces nested flashbacks.
Oh God, the nested flashbacks.
Meaning, the film will initiate a flashback. And while inside that flashback, a character will trigger another flashback to an even earlier time.
Flashback inception.
Yes. And these occur without warning or distinct visual cues, leaving the viewer entirely unmoored in time and space, struggling to remember which decade they're currently watching.
Here's where it gets really interesting.
Yeah.
Because amidst all the structural chaos, the incomprehensible editing, and the boardroom politics, you have the central performance and the stylistic choices of the film.
Ah, yes, the aesthetic.
And this is the exact tipping point where Gotti transitions from just being a confusing, poorly edited movie and crosses the border into the realm of unintentional, campy hilarity.
The performance anchoring this entire chaotic enterprise is, of course, John Travolta taking on the titular role of John Gotti.
The man himself.
And Travolta attempts a highly ambitious feat. He tries to physically embody Gotti across several decades of his life, from his days as a low-level earner to his final days as an elderly man in prison.
Ambitious is certainly one way to describe it.
Yeah.
Ill-advised might be another. Travolta was deep into his 60s during the primary filming of this movie.
Right.
The sources universally note the visual absurdity of a 60-year-old man smothered in obvious prosthetic makeup and highly questionable distracting wigs, trying to pass himself off as a spry, 30-something street-level mobster in the scenes set in the 1970s.
It immediately shatters whatever fragile suspension of disbelief the audience might have managed to hold on to.
It looks ridiculous.
It highlights once again the lack of resources and the poor decision-making at the executive level.
Because they just didn't have the budget to fix it.
A better funded, more disciplined production would have recognized the limitations. They would have either cast a younger actor to play the younger versions of Gotti, creating a seamless transition later in the film, or they would have utilized high-end digital de-aging technology.
Like The Irishman did.
Exactly. But here, lacking those resources or the foresight, they just throw a jark wig on him, adjust the lighting slightly, and hope the audience is willing to play along.
Just squint and he looks 30.
Right. But Travolta's commitment to the role, while undeniably passionate, actually ends up working against the film's intended gritty realism.
His commitment was extreme, actually.
What did he do?
The sources detail the length he went to in order to find the character. He didn't just read books. He was on set wearing the actual vintage clothes that belonged to the real John Gotti.
Wow, wearing his actual clothes.
Yeah, and he went so far as to acquire and wear Gotti's real personal cologne during the filming of his scenes.
That is wow.
He stated in an interview that he could smell the cologne all day, and he described the experience as haunting.
That kind of extreme sensory preparation is fascinating from an acting perspective.
It is.
But it often reveals an actor who is desperately searching for an external anchor to a character.
Explain that a bit more.
When the internal script is hollow, when the dialogue doesn't provide the psychological depth necessary to build a human being, actors will sometimes overcompensate with external props. Wardrobe, scent, mannerisms.
Because they don't have the words to work with.
Exactly. And this extreme external commitment clearly manifests in his vocal performance as well.
Oh, the accent.
He adopts this incredibly thick, overpronounced, highly theatrical Italian-American accent.
It's so much.
One critic famously joked that Travolta smothered the words La Cosa Nostra in a thick layer of marinara sauce.
That is a brilliant line.
He leans so heavily into the tough guy tropes that it stops being a performance of a complicated human being and devolves into a broad caricature.
It feels like you're watching an actor do an impression of a mobster from a late-night sketch comedy show, rather than observing a real person navigating a dangerous life.
Completely.
And it's not just the acting that feels jarringly out of place. The auditory and visual aesthetic choices are completely baffling.
Let's talk about the soundtrack.
Oh, we have to. The score for this 1970s and 80s period piece was composed by the modern club rapper Pitbull.
Placing the musical stylings of Mr. Worldwide into a gritty New York mafia narrative is a decision that baffled every critic who watched it.
It is deeply jarring. Music in a period film isn't just background noise, it is a vital tool for establishing a sense of time and place.
Absolutely.
The YouTube critics zeroed in on one specific mind-boggling scene to illustrate this failure, a neighborhood block party set in the year 1981.
And what's playing?
The scene features Pitbull's modern, pulsating electronic club music thumping aggressively on the soundtrack.
In 1981.
Yes. Furthermore, the scene is visually shot so poorly, with such flat lighting and lack of depth, that the critics noted it literally looks like low-quality 3GP cell phone footage from the early 2000s.
It destroys any chance at period immersion.
It takes you completely out of the movie.
A skilled director uses music meticulously to bypass the logical brain and instantly anchor your subconscious in a specific era.
Right.
When Martin Scorsese directs a film set in the 70s, he uses the Rolling Stones or specific doo-wop tracks to immediately tell you where and when you are.
You feel the 70s.
The use of Pitbull here screams of a desperate, boardroom-mandated attempt to appeal to a younger, modern demographic.
The kids love Pitbull, put him in the movie.
Right. And it completely sacrifices the film's narrative integrity and atmospheric realism in the process.
And speaking of narrative integrity in the context of an Italian-American mob movie, there is a glaring structural omission in Gotti that the YouTube critic Ralph the Movie Maker hilariously pointed out.
Which is?
And once you hear it, you realize how fatal it is to the movie's authenticity.
Tell me.
There is absolutely no food in this movie. Nobody eats.
Really?
Not once.
It sounds like a minor, almost trivial detail on the surface.
Yeah.
But in the context of the Italian-American mafia genre, it is a massive, fundamental structural flaw.
It's huge.
Food is not just sustenance in these films. It is a vital narrative tool and a cultural touchstone.
Think about the titans of the genre. If you watch Goodfellas or The Sopranos, food is ubiquitous.
It's everywhere.
It's the social glue of the entire underworld. Characters are constantly bonding, plotting murders, scheming, and betraying each other over massive, steaming plates of baked ziti. Think of the iconic scene in Goodfellas where they were slicing garlic paper thin with a razor blade while in federal prison.
A classic scene.
Or think of Tony Soprano eating veal shanks and drinking wine at Vesuvio. The dining table is the boardroom where the family, both blood relatives and criminal associates, operates.
Food provides a necessary chilling contrast.
Oh, so.
The genius of the mob genre relies heavily on the juxtaposition of domestic warmth, loyalty, and deeply ingrained family tradition against the backdrop of cold, sociopathic violence.
Wow, that's a great point.
When Tony Soprano eats a bowl of ice cream in his kitchen or hosts a sunny backyard barbecue, it makes his capacity for sudden, brutal murder all the more terrifying because he seems so incredibly comfortably normal.
It grounds the monsters in reality.
Exactly. In Gotti, as the critics noted, the gangsters just sit at sterile, empty tables in dark rooms.
So weird.
They might sip a glass of water. There are no scenes of them cooking, sharing a meal, or engaging in the rituals of their culture.
It reveals such a profound misunderstanding of the specific subculture they are attempting to portray.
Precisely. It reveals that the filmmaker fundamentally misunderstands the mechanics of the genre's appeal.
Right.
Travolta isn't entirely to blame for the film feeling artificial. He is trapped in a film that lacks any cultural grounding.
He's doing his best in a vacuum.
Without those tactile touchstones like the communal meals, the rituals, the domestic reality, the characters don't feel like a family with a shared history. They just feel like actors standing on a soundstage reciting dialogue.
Okay, so to really prove just how badly this 2018 version missed the mark, we don't have to just guess at what could have been. We actually have a perfect, real-world control group.
Oh, the 1996 movie.
Yes, we can look at how the exact same events of John Gotti's life can make for a genuinely compelling, critically acclaimed story. Let's look at the 1996 HBO movie, simply titled Gotti.
It is a phenomenal point of comparison because it effectively isolates the variables.
It really does.
You have the same historical subject, the same basic timeline of real-world events, but it is executed with an entirely different philosophy, a different team, and different source material.
So, the 1996 version starred Armand Assante as John Gotti and the legendary Anthony Quinn as his mentor, the underboss Neil Dellacroce.
An incredible cast.
Right off the bat, the casting choices dictate a completely different tone.
The casting was essential. First, Armand Assante was age-appropriate for the prime years of the Gotti's reign.
That helps immensely.
More importantly, Assante brought a quiet, brooding, genuinely dominant aura to the character.
He didn't have to scream.
Exactly. He didn't feel the need to overact, to scream, or to rely on the exaggerated tough guy posturing and facial contortion that Travolta utilized.
He just sat there and you were terrified of him.
Assante understood that true power doesn't need to shout. He conveyed menace and authority through stillness and presence.
And pairing him with Anthony Quinn, I mean, come on.
Right. An actor possessing immense cinematic gravity added immediate, undeniable weight and legitimacy to the production. The 1996 film wasn't a cartoonish caricature. It was a serious, grounded drama.
And the foundational bedrock of the 1996 movie was totally different from the 2018 version.
This is source material.
The HBO film wasn't based on family hearsay or the memories of Gotti's children. It was adapted from the meticulous investigative journalism of a true crime reporter named Jerry Capeci.
He was the authority on this stuff.
He had literally co-authored the definitive book, Gotti, Rise and Fall, which utilized FBI wiretaps and court documents to focus incredibly tightly on the actual verifiable mafia hierarchy and operations of the 70s and 80s.
That difference in source material is the crucial distinction.
It changes everything.
The 1996 film succeeded primarily because it established clear boundaries and didn't bite off more than it could chew.
It knew what it was.
It had a specific, narrow narrative focus. Gotti's ruthless, cunning rise to power and the internal, lethal politics of the Gambino crime family.
It didn't try to cover 40 years of history.
No. It didn't try to be a sprawling, disjointed, non-linear epic. It relied on objective, deeply researched journalistic source material, which grounded the narrative in factual reality rather than participating in historical myth-making.
Let me frame it this way for you, the listener. The 1996 film is like reading a rigorously researched, heavily cited investigative deep dive in a major newspaper.
Right.
It presents the facts, shows the mechanisms of power, and lets you draw your conclusions.
And the 2018 film.
The 2018 film, by contrast, feels like scrolling through a heavily filtered, carefully curated, self-soothing social media feed managed by a PR team.
That is painfully accurate.
It only shows you the angles they want you to see.
The social media analogy is incredibly fitting because it perfectly encapsulates the shift from objective observation to subjective curation.
Exactly.
And that stark comparison of source material journalism versus family myth brings us to what the critics argued was the most troubling, problematic aspect of the 2018 film.
The bias.
Its blatant bias, its lack of critical distance, and its ultimate moral bankruptcy.
Right, because the 2018 film wasn't just a technically flawed look at a historical figure.
No, it was much more insidious.
It was heavily influenced, guided, and approved by John Gotti Jr., to the point where multiple sources describe the film as functioning primarily as a vanity project for the Gotti family.
The danger of biography is access.
Say more about that.
When a production allows the subjects of a biographical film, or their immediate family members who hold the rights, to heavily dictate the narrative flow, you inherently sacrifice objectivity.
You can't be impartial if the subject is paying the bills.
Exactly. The 2018 film actively glosses over the brutal, violent realities of John Gotti's extensive crimes. It minimizes the extortion, the murders, the corruption.
It practically ignores them.
Instead, it bends over backwards to portray him primarily as a fiercely loyal, misunderstood family man who was, bizarrely, the ultimate victim of relentless, unfair persecution by the federal government.
It frames him as the victim.
It's astounding.
And the ending of the movie is where this bias goes from subtle to screaming out loud.
The ending is wild.
The movie literally ends by cutting away from the actors and showing real-life archival footage of neighborhood locals in New York praising John Gotti.
Just random people on the street.
Yeah, talking about how he kept the streets safe and helped the community. And then it cuts back to the narrative, to Kelly Preston.
Who played Victoria Gotti.
Right, and who was, of course, John Travolta's real-life wife.
Right.
She's berating the justice system. She looks almost directly into the lens and proclaims with total sincerity, the government are the real gangsters.
So on the nose.
The filmmakers allow the family's defense mechanisms to become the absolute moral truth of the film.
And it culminates with a truly bizarre cinematic choice. Travolta actually breaks the fourth wall.
Oh, I forgot about that.
In the final moments, he looks directly out at the audience in the theater to boast, "You ain't never gonna see another guy like me if you live to be 5,000.
Like it's a brag.
It frames his entire life of extortion, murder, and racketeering, not as a tragedy or a cautionary tale, but as something legendary, aspirational, and heroic.
But, okay, let me push back on the critics' outrage here, because I think there's a double standard we need to address.
Okay, I'm listening.
Don't all massively successful mob movies romanticize the criminal lifestyle to some degree?
To some degree, yes.
I mean, people idolize Vito Corleone in The Godfather. They quote his lines about family and respect.
I'm going to make him an offer he can't refuse.
Exactly. College kids have posters of Tony Montana from Scarface sitting behind a mountain of cocaine, or Tony Soprano smoking a cigar hanging on their dorm room walls.
That's true.
The genre is inherently seductive. So why is Gotti doing this considered so much more offensive or morally bankrupt than when Scorsese or Coppola does it?
That is a vital, central question to understanding film critique. The distinction doesn't lie in the initial seduction.
Okay.
It lies in the arc of the narrative and the ultimate moral perspective of the filmmaker.
Elaborate on that.
Yes. Masterful directors like Francis Ford Coppola and Martin Scorsese spend the first half of their films exploring the intoxicating allure of the mob.
They hook you.
They show you the bespoke suits, the wads of cash, the VIP treatment at the Copacabana, the untouchable power. They make you understand why someone would sell their soul for that life.
You want to be them for a little bit.
And this is the crucial difference, they always depict the bill coming due.
The consequences.
They depict the inevitable moral decay, the suffocating, unbearable paranoia, the betrayal of friends, and the ultimate descent into a personal, inescapable hell.
That's very true. Henry Hill doesn't ride off into the sunset. He ends up a miserable, paranoid schnurk eating egg noodles and ketchup in witness protection, terrified of his own shadow.
Exactly.
Michael Corleone achieves absolute power, but he ends up completely alone in the world, having alienated his wife and literally ordered the murder of his own brother.
He loses his soul. Or look at Tony Soprano. The show is brilliant, precisely because it allows Tony to be deeply complex, charming, and sometimes sympathetic. But the creator, David Chase, never, ever lets the audience forget that Tony is a deeply flawed, violent, racist, and hypocritical monster who destroys the lives of almost everyone he touches.
The narrative continually punishes him.
Spiritually, psychologically, and emotionally, if not always legally.
Right.
The 2018 version of Gotti, however, acts as pure, unadulterated propaganda.
Because the family held the reins?
Because the family held the reins and dictated the terms, the film removes all nuance, all consequence, and all moral judgment from the equation.
It's just a highlight reel of greatness.
It essentially functions as a multi-million-dollar defense attorney's closing argument for organized crime, which is why critics found it not just technically inept, but fundamentally morally bankrupt.
So let's take stock of where we are.
We're deep in the weeds.
We have a movie that is technically inept, structurally incomprehensible, badly acted, historically sanitized, and morally bankrupt.
A masterpiece of failure.
Naturally, when you release a product like that, it is destined to be absolutely eviscerated by professional critics.
As it was.
But the story of Gotti gets even wilder when we look at how the movie's financial backers reacted to that devastating 0% Rotten Tomatoes score.
This is where it gets crazy.
The aftermath is almost crazier than the production.
The post-release phase of Gotti is where it transitions from being a standard Hollywood creative failure into a bizarre, unprecedented corporate case study in market manipulation.
Let's get into it. So the movie finally opens in theaters to a dismal $1.6 million against a reported production budget of at least $10 million.
A total flop.
By any metric, it is officially a massive box office flop. But instead of accepting defeat, cutting their losses, and quietly fading away to streaming, the marketing team decides to do something incredibly aggressive.
They lean in.
They lean directly into the 0% critic score. They launch this combative us versus them ad campaign.
I remember seeing those ads.
The television and social media ads literally claimed, audiences loved Gotti, but critics don't want you to see it. Ignore the trolls behind a keyboard.
Calling the critics trolls.
It was a highly calculated attempt to weaponize the modern populist divide.
It really was. They were trying to reframe the narrative, positioning film critics not as experts giving an honest assessment, but as out-of-touch, elitist snobs who had a personal vindictive agenda against the movie.
Like it was a conspiracy against John Travolta.
But you're telling the public, the elites hate this, which means the real people must love it.
And the fascinating thing is, initially, if you were a casual moviegoer who just briefly glanced at the Rotten Tomatoes page, they actually seemed to have a valid point.
Because of the audience score.
Great, because while the critics universally gave it a 0%, the audience score, the metric determined by everyday users logging in and voting, sat suspiciously high at an 80% approval rating.
That is a massive gap.
And it wasn't just a small handful of diehard Travolta fans voting. There were over 7,000 user reviews logged for Gotti almost immediately after opening weekend.
To put that 7,000 number in perspective, so you understand the scale of the anomaly.
Yeah, give us the context.
That was more user reviews than Pixar's highly anticipated blockbuster Incredibles 2 received on its own opening weekend.
Wait, Incredibles 2.
Yes. And Incredibles 2 made over $180 million at the box office, with millions of people buying tickets. Gotti made $1.6 million.
So millions of people saw Incredibles 2, but only a few thousand saw Gotti.
The math simply did not add up. There physically were not enough people seeing the movie to organically generate that volume of enthusiastic reviews.
It defied basic logic. So internet sleuths on platforms like Reddit, along with entertainment journalists, started digging deeply into those 7,000 glowing user reviews to see who was actually writing them.
And what did they find?
They discovered a massive, glaring discrepancy. One Reddit user took a random sample of 58 early, highly positive reviews for Gotti. Out of those 58 reviews, 45 of them were from accounts that had been created that exact same month. Brand new accounts.
Creating a massive influx of brand new accounts specifically to boost a product is highly indicative of astroturfing.
Astroturfing.
Yeah, it's the deceptive practice of orchestrating a fake grassroots campaign to artificially manufacture public support. It looks like real grass, but it's fake.
That makes perfect sense. But the real smoking gun, the detail that blew the whole conspiracy wide open, was that 32 of those newly created accounts had only ever reviewed 2 specific movies on the entire platform.
Which ones?
Gotti and another independent heist film called American Animals.
American Animals.
So what does this all mean? Why those 2 completely unrelated movies?
This is where we introduce the final, incredible, chaotic piece of the puzzle. MoviePass.
Oh man, MoviePass. What a wildly specific era of recent history.
For those listeners who might not remember or who missed out on the gold rush, MoviePass was a tech subscription app that, for a brief, glorious period, offered an unbelievable deal.
Unbelievable is the word.
Users could see 1 movie a day, every single day, in standard theaters for a flat subscription fee of just $9.95 a month.
Which, if you think about it for even a second, is a completely insane business model.
Completely insane.
The average cost of a single movie ticket in a major city is around $15. If you see 1 movie, the company is already losing money on you.
It's what is known in economics and the fitness industry as a breakage model.
How does that work?
They were relying heavily on the gym membership philosophy. They were hoping people would subscribe, feel good about having the option, and then get too busy and forget to actually use it.
Right.
Their internal data assumed that 89% of casual moviegoers only went to the theater about 4 times a year.
Okay.
If you pay them $10 every month, 12 months a year, and only see 4 movies, MoviePass makes a massive profit off your inactivity.
But human behavior with movies isn't the same as with the gym.
No, it is not.
Going to the gym is hard work. Going to the movies is fun. If you give people a magical red card that lets them see unlimited movies for free, they are going to go to the movies.
And that is exactly what destroyed them. The breakage model failed spectacularly.
I use mine like 3 times a week.
See? The average MoviePass user wasn't staying home. They were seeing over 2 movies a month.
And because MoviePass wasn't a theater chain, they didn't own the seats.
Right. MoviePass was using their own venture capital to pay full retail price to the theater chains for every single ticket their users bought.
That is hemorrhage levels of money loss.
They're bleeding tens of millions of dollars every single month. Their parent company, an analytics firm called Helios and Matheson, saw their stock price absolutely plummet from dollars to pennies.
They were in a free fall.
Desperate for cash and desperate to prove to investors they had a path to profitability.
So, in a desperate last-ditch bid to save themselves, Helios and Matheson decide they can't just be the middlemen paying for tickets, they need to own the product. They create a subsidiary called MoviePass Ventures to actually buy financial stakes in the films themselves, correct?
Yes. They acquired equity stakes in a couple of independent films they thought they could turn into hits.
And those films were, you guessed it, American Animals and Gotti.
Exactly. Their overarching strategy was to leverage their massive active user base to drive up the box office numbers of the films they owned.
How did they do that?
They heavily pushed notifications directly to their app users' phones, aggressively urging them to go see Gotti.
Go see our movie.
In fact, the data showed that MoviePass users accounted for a staggering 40% of all tickets sold for Gotti during its opening weekend.
Let me make sure I'm untangling this web correctly because it's wild.
It is a tangled web.
MoviePass, a company running out of money, was essentially paying full retail price for its own subscribers to go see a movie that MoviePass owned a financial stake in.
Yes.
They were artificially pumping up the box office numbers, trying to make the movie look like a massive organic hit to the rest of the industry.
Yes. It was an incredibly convoluted, circular financial shell game.
Wow.
They were essentially taking their own dwindling venture capital and passing it from their left hand to their right hand, hoping the motion would generate enough heat to attract outside investors.
And then, when the professional critics saw the movie and rightfully destroyed it with that 0% rating, threatening to derail the entire scheme, someone panicked.
Big time panic.
Now, MoviePass officially denied any involvement in the Rotten Tomatoes manipulation, but the circumstantial evidence is overwhelming, given that the fake accounts only reviewed the 2 specific movies MoviePass owned.
It's too much of a coincidence.
It appears someone orchestrated a massive fake review campaign using bot farms to artificially inflate the audience score.
Also, they could run those combative ads calling the critics trolls in a desperate attempt to trick non-subscribers into buying tickets with real money.
That is just wow.
It reveals an unprecedented, almost tragic level of corporate desperation.
Trying to trick people into saving their company?
They were trying to forcefully manipulate the public perception of reality to salvage a failing tech company.
But did it work?
The ultimate tragedy for them is that the manipulation didn't work. The word of mouth was toxic.
People still hated the movie.
Exactly. Gotti still flopped spectacularly, losing millions. And MoviePass, having burned through all its cash paying for its own tickets, ultimately filed for bankruptcy and collapsed.
So the film wasn't just a creative failure. It became a literal pawn in a doomed tech industry business game.
It was the final nail in their coffin.
It is truly the perfect storm of failure. We've untangled so many threads today.
We really have covered a lot of ground.
To summarize this incredibly wild ride for you, the 2018 Gotti was a misguided vanity project fueled by mob nepotism and a desire to rewrite criminal history into a heroic myth.
Right.
It was directed by an actor who was completely out of his depth managing a project of that scale. It was hacked to pieces in the editing room, resulting in a confusing, non-linear mess that relied on Wikipedia-style exposition.
And the nested flashbacks.
The nested flashbacks. It featured bizarre, campy creative choices, from Travolta's overacting and prosthetic makeup to Pitbull's jarring club soundtrack.
And no big CD.
And it entirely missed the cultural mark by omitting the structural importance of food. And ultimately, when all those creative failures compounded, it was used as a desperate pawn in a failing tech company's financial shell game, complete with astroturfed reviews and troll marketing.
It serves as a definitive masterclass in what happens when a production lacks artistic discipline, structural boundaries, and objective distance.
Absolutely.
A truly great biographical film requires a filmmaker willing to confront the dark, uncomfortable, unvarnished truths of its subject.
You have to see the bad with the good.
It requires a singular, strong vision to shape those truths into a coherent, compelling narrative. Gotti lacked every single one of those foundational elements.
Every single one.
It surrendered its narrative authority to the very people it should have been scrutinizing, and it collapsed under the weight of its own compromises.
Which brings up a really fascinating point for you to chew on as we wrap up our deep dive today.
What's that?
We are currently entering an era in media where celebrities, politicians, athletes, and public figures increasingly have the immense wealth and the personal production companies required to fund and control their own autobiographical documentaries and feature films.
We see it all the time now.
We see it constantly on streaming services now. The multi-part documentary about the athlete, produced by the athlete.
It's a rapidly growing trend across all platforms, and it's a highly concerning one for the preservation of historical accuracy and objective storytelling.
Exactly. So the question we have to ask ourselves as viewers is this: where is the line between a genuine, revealing biopic and a highly produced, multi-million-dollar PR commercial?
It's getting blurry.
If the subject of the movie is the one holding the purse strings, if the family is sitting in Video Village behind the director's monitor giving notes, can we ever truly trust the history we're watching on screen?
Or are we just quietly accepting the sanitized, heroic version of themselves they want us to see?
It is a question that demands active, critical viewing and media literacy from all of us every time we press play.
We have to stay sharp.
Because if we aren't careful, and if we don't question the source of the stories we consume, we might find ourselves staring at a cinematic landscape where the truth is as murky, manipulated, and as mathematically flawed as a 0% rating on a broken machine. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.